The Asian Cup just ended. You might not have known that, but you probably didn't get to watch most of it, which is why you're here, to see how the executable is going to go down. So this is what happened and everything you need to know about any cool thing that happened in the Asian Cup. Cool? Cool. One homie to another. I got you. All right, so it started out super basic. This is why everybody was hyping up AFCON, because Asian Cup, there's like a couple good teams in Asia, and of course they were just slaying it immediately. You had Qatar with the win, Australia with the win. China drew against Tajikistan, which was the first inkling that like something weird was going to happen, because, China's China and Tajikistan's not even a real country. So like you had that dynamic going on. Tajikistan is important. We're going to come back to those guys later, because they're actually in their first ever Asian Cup, and I fell in love with their coach because he looks like this. I'm just assuming the editor's going to put up a picture of the guy. If they don't, then I guess you guys are out of luck. I don't know what to tell you. Japan won its first match. UAE won its first match. Iran won its first match. South Korea won its first match. Iraq was the favorite over Indonesia. They won their first match. Jordan won their first match over Malaysia. Thailand even won their first match over Kyrgyzstan. Saudi Arabia won their first match over Oman. China showed up again and managed to not score against Lebanon, which is an unserious country with a tree in their flag. So that's an 0 for 2 for China there. We're going to come back to that, because they suck, which is really impressive considering. I mean, I know everybody makes fun of China because how many people they have, but like it is really impressive because they tried to get into the sport and invest a ton of money in it. They're like Saudi Arabia, but 15 years in the future, basically. Except Saudi Arabia is also, and this is true, way better than China, because they did manage to show up and win their second match. Thailand won. I already told you that. So we're just moving on. Qatar beat Tajikistan because Tajikistan got a red card. Anyways, like the first couple match days, nothing actually interesting or crazy happened in the Asian Cup at all. So if you didn't know what was going on for the first week and a half, 2 weeks that it was happening, you missed basically nothing. I watched the 0-0 between Tajikistan and China, and I would have rather gone to the dentist office for 2 hours. Like if that manager hadn't exist, I probably would have deleted my subscription to Paramount Plus instead of continued to watch the tournament. But it's a good thing I stuck around, because we get to the second match day, and that's when we got our first shot of, hey, some crazy shit's going down. Iraq and Japan. Iraq did not beat Germany and Spain at the World Cup. Japan did beat Germany and Spain at the World Cup. And Iraq beat Japan. Iraq beat them 2-1, and they beat them because of a guy named Ayman Hussein. Now, I want you to just get out your notepad, kids. Welcome to class. Write that name down. He's going to come back later. He is a very important character in this Asian Cup for a lot of reasons. And he started that with a brace against Japan, 2-0 lead in the first half. Indo scored in the 93rd minute, or else this match was 2-0. I mean, Japan absolutely fumbled the bag here, and that just apparently woke the entire tournament up, because the party started. Indonesia picked up a win, 1-0 over Vietnam. I don't know if you've been keeping track of this stuff. I have, because I'm a psycho. Indonesia's really never been good, so a win at the Asian Cup is a monster deal for them. Hong Kong also, yeah, they were in the tournament, which I know what you're thinking. It's weird that China was in the tournament twice, but this is brought to you by the People's Republic of China. Not really. But I'm surprised that like China lets them play in this. I'm stoked for them. I'm glad they made the Asian Cup. It's Hong Kong's first appearance in 58 years. Hope they had a lot of fun. Their fans were great. You were watching the matches, but then we meet one of the key protagonists of the Asian Cup, Jordan, who showed up against South Korea, who also made the round of 16 at the World Cup in Qatar in 2022 and failed to beat a Jordan team that is comprised almost entirely of players from the Jordanian top league, the Jordanian Premier League. I don't know what it's called, and if I did, I feel like you'd need to check me and make me go outside. So Jordan took a 2-1 lead, actually, and South Korea did something that they would make a habit of in this tournament. They scored in stoppage time. It was an own goal off Al-Arab, which I believe means the Arab in Spanish. That wasn't even a good joke. I don't know what that was. But yeah, they scored stoppage time. It was 2-2. South Korea was on ice, and they were not done. They were not done acting a fool. You know who did start acting awesome was freaking Tajikistan, because Tajikistan goes into the last match with a situation. They have 1 point, right? Because they drew China, because China can't beat anybody. Of course, they drew 0-0. And so Tajikistan has 1 point. If you get 4 points, even if you finish in third in the Asian Cup, it's one of those tournaments. The majority of third place teams go through. 4 of the 6 third place teams from the groups go through. So Tajikistan with 4 points, even if you finish third, you're looking great. And they went down. They went down in the 47th minute against Lebanon, who had looked worse than Tajikistan in this tournament. But Lebanon takes the lead. They get a red card in the 56th minute. And then magic from our bald, skullet friend who's coaching that team. Because Tajikistan scores 2 goals. They score in the 80th minute, and then in the 92nd minute, my boy Kamrakulov drops the goal to get Tajikistan not only their first ever Asian Cup win in their first ever Asian Cup, but also, obviously, their first ever trip to the Asian Cup knockouts. Why not? Because it's freaking Tajikistan. Now, while that was happening, China was doing us the favor of not scoring, and that means that China played 3 matches, got 2 points, and did not score a goal. They lost to Qatar, who won the group comfortably, and just kind of rocked on through. Tajikistan also finished second in the group, by the way, because China and Lebanon had 2 points and 1 point. So China did finish in second, but didn't go to the knockouts. Because you have to score a goal. That's like a legally binding thing. If you don't score a goal, you should be barred from being able to participate in the knockouts of a tournament. I feel like that's something that we should all be able to get behind. There was some drama on the final day, particularly around Indonesia, who with the 3 points was like the third place team on the bubble. And if Oman won, they were going to knock them out. Oman had a 1-0 lead over Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, I know if you're like, why are there so many stands? Look, honestly, any reasonable person wouldn't know there were this many stands either, but they did a good job. They all made it to the Asian Cup this year, except for Turkmenistan. Those freaking losers don't know what they were doing. Afghanistan, I mean, come on. What do you, like, everybody else is here, join the party. But in the 80th minute, Kyrgyzstan did join the party. They scored a goal that knocked Oman out and put Indonesia into the round of 16. Now, there wasn't really much point to that because, like Indonesia wasn't going to do anything once they got there, but at least they got to celebrate making the knockouts. You know, it's all about the minor victories. South Korea also made it very clear that they were very much going to choke this away again. I'm wearing a Tottenham jersey in honor of Son because he is apparently just never going to win a trophy, even though South Korea is inarguably one of the most 2 talented teams in Asia. It's them and Japan. They're the only 2 teams that have, you know, bona fide world-class players on their team at multiple positions, and it's just not happening. And so South Korea drew Malaysia, which, by the way, if you didn't know where Malaysia was on a map, it's right here, except it's not. It's actually right here, and I am going to continue to get you with that joke, except sometimes I'm going to point out the actual country the first time, which is what we did in this case, because the first country we were pointing at is actually Malaysia, so you got fooled. That's Malaysia. I promise. No more back and forth, although we might do that to you in the future. South Korea had the lead at halftime and then really tried to blow it because they gave up the lead in the 62nd minute, tied it in the 83rd, scored in the 94th on a pen to take a 3-2 lead, and then gave up a goal in the 105th minute. And that's not like extra time, obviously. That was 15 minutes of stoppage time that Malaysia scored in to get a massive point for their national team. They were also going nuts, even though they were already eliminated. I just feel the need to point out also in this final match day that Bahrain beat Jordan. 1, to remind you that Bahrain's a country, because you probably forgot. And 2, Bahrain actually won the group because they finished with 6 points. They won 2 matches after losing to South Korea to start, and that meant Jordan finished in third with just 4 points. Again, Jordan is going to be important. But we go to the knockouts, and I told you Indonesia wasn't going to be important. They freaking lost 4-0 to Australia, who have won the Asian Cup before, and they're going to the quarterfinal. The next quarterfinal, though, was, in a word, titillating, because it was Tajikistan, good alliteration, and the United Arab Emirates, who, while they've only been to the World Cup 1 time, the UAE is actually a very consistently competitive team in the Asian Cup. They only missed the Asian World Cup playoff by a couple of points in World Cup qualifying not too long ago, and they usually make at least the quarterfinal, sometimes the semifinal. They've been to the final before. They've never won the whole thing, but they're definitely a solid, competent team, if I could ever get comfortable in this freaking chair. But Tajikistan took the lead early. Kanananov, which sounds like a ChatGPT generated name for a Central Asian dude, scored. And then in the 95th minute, I was heartbroken because I was actually watching this live. Al-Hamidi scored, and it was... the air went out of the building, right? Because Tajikistan had they had a bunch of fans there. There's good energy. and so did the UAE, obviously, and they scored to equalize it. We end up going to a penalty shootout, and my boys from Tajikistan scored all 5 penalties. It was a real fun shootout. The dude named Kayo Kanedo playing for the UAE, which is one of those names where you're like, so you play in the UAE league and you've just lived there for 5 years. Fair play, my dude. Get the bag. He's the guy that missed the penalty. And yeah, UAE out. Tajikistan to the quarterfinal. Again, their first ever tournament. So that was immediately, I put all of my eggs in that basket. I hitched myself to the Tajik wagon. And I was like, this is what we're doing. But that was not the craziest match of the round of 16, because the craziest match of the round of 16 happened the next day. It was Iraq and Jordan. I told you Jordan were going to be our main protagonists, and they took the lead. Yusuf Al-Naimat, who had a fantastic tournament, scored first for Jordan. That dude did not know what his name was before the tournament, popped all the way off. But Iraq, definitely a better team, former Asian champions in 2007. They bounced back. They scored in the 68th minute. And then that guy, remember I told you, did you take the notes? The question is, did you take the notes? Because the guy, Ayman Hussein, he's back. He scores in the 76th minute. And then he goes and runs off the field and he does a celebration and woo, go team. Sports. And then he comes back on the field and sits down and does another celebration. And the referee just walks over and gives him a second yellow card. So he's off. So they just scored to take the lead, and you just got sent off for excessive celebration in the knockouts in a 2-1 game with 15 minutes left. At which point, one of the craziest friggin' things you've ever seen in a match happens. It is, if you've not seen this, and I obviously can't show it to you in its entirety, because of copyright, whatever, keeping the man down. How dare they? But 95th minute, 97th minute, goals to go from 2-1 down to 3-2 up. I mean, they scored basically off the freaking kickoff in the 97th minute. Iraq couldn't believe what was happening. And Jordan just pulled a rabbit out of the hat. I mean, there was some David Copperfield nonsense from Jordan to get itself to the quarterfinal. Now, this is a Jordanian team that had only been to the quarterfinal once before in the Asian Cup. They're not really a perennial power, even continentally. Like the UAE, if you just watch the World Cup or whatever, you don't know that they're kind of a decent team in Asia. Jordan's not in that category. This is, at this point, arguably the most important win Jordan's ever had as a national team to get to this quarterfinal, and they did it in the 95th and 97th minute. It was sick. Other parts of the knockouts, you had Palestine, who qualified for the knockouts for the first time ever, which was a sick story. They played the hosts, Qatar, and Qatar did end up winning, but Palestine had the lead for like a pretty wild 11 minutes before Qatar scored right before halftime. And Qatar would go on to win 2-1, eliminating Palestine. Where's the fun in that, man? I hate it when underdogs lose. Then we had Uzbekistan advance, and we get to South Korea. Yes, Uzbekistan. You already knew they were in the tournament. The stands were here, just in case I hadn't mentioned that before. All of the stands were here, except for Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, and I guess Pakistan counts too. But are they real? They're fake. They're a fake stand. Come on, you can't be right next to India and be a stand. What are you doing? Not that I know too much about geography, but you got to be somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You can't be in an actual area where people are familiar. This is not the point. We had Saudi Arabia and South Korea, and this was a big match. But Saudi Arabia's got to be thinking they got a chance to win this tournament. They beat Argentina at the World Cup. An Asian Cup that's in Qatar is basically a home Asian Cup for Saudi Arabia. It's 5 minutes away on a road trip if you live right on the border. So they are loving it, and they take a 1-0 lead. But South Korea, for the third time already in this tournament, scores in stoppage time. And it had been coming. I was watching this match. They had been all over Saudi Arabia. South Korea had been all over Saudi Arabia for the 20 minutes leading up to this goal. Just nonstop siege. And Cho Gae-sung, who scored at the World Cup as well, scored in the 99th minute to level it for South Korea. And that brings us all the way to a penalty shootout where Son leads the way. All 4 penalties converted. A guy from my Football Manager save missed a penalty for Saudi Arabia, so unfortunately I had to disown him. But South Korea advanced to the quarterfinal despite the fact that they'd drawn their 3 of their first 4 matches in regulation, and they needed the help of some seriously late goals to do it. You also had Iran going to penalties against Syria, who'd never been to the knockouts before, so the Asian Cup was just feeling wild this year in terms of teams that could make it. Syria backed into the the freaking round of 16 and took Iran the distance. This is an Iran team that beat Gareth Bale and Wales at the World Cup. So, I mean, these are the top teams in Asia starting to get pushed in a really serious way, but Iran scored all 5 penalties to get through. There's no real drama in terms of like when the goals were scored. And this created a quarterfinal that absolutely divided my soul. Not the match with Iran. That Jordan and Tajikistan ended up playing against each other in the quarterfinal, which, like, one of those teams having to lose, 2 great underdogs, was absolutely brutal. Jordan ended up winning at 1-0, but that didn't stop our skeleton hero, the coach of Tajikistan, from saying that, you know, AFC wants certain teams to win or whatever. Remember that he said that, because Jordan's going to be feeling a very similar way later at some point in this video. Oh my, spoilers! South Korea continued their just absolutely brutal draw. They had to play against Australia in the quarterfinal after playing Saudi Arabia in the round of 16. That is running the gauntlet in Asia. And you already know what happened. Australia led for most of the match, and then in the 96th minute, it's a penalty, and the penalty goes in, and South Korea ties it for the 4th time in stoppage time. Once again, a draw in regulation, except this time we get a direct free kick wonder strike from Son Heung-min that carries South Korea into the semifinal. You also had Iran play Japan. Now, Iran and Japan are 2 teams that would have gone into this tournament thinking they could win the whole thing. Same with Australia and South Korea. So pretty brutal draw, to be honest. And Iran knocked Japan out. Japan had the lead, but it got all the way to the 96th minute, and Ali Reza Jahanbakhsh, just in case you forgot about that guy he used to play in England, he scored the penalty. He might still play in England. Honestly, I don't even know. Where do you play? Feyenoord. That's, last time I checked, that's not in England. So that's good. And then the other quarterfinal was Qatar and Uzbekistan, which is fun until you realize that Qatar won and you're rooting for Uzbekistan because their nickname is the White Wolves. And Uzbekistan has been getting screwed out of World Cup qualification for the last couple of cycles. 3 cycles ago, they missed on goal difference. 2 cycles ago, I'm pretty sure they missed by 1 point. So I've been rooting for Uzbekistan to have something good happen to them for a while. They get to the quarterfinal and they lose on a penalty shootout, but they really had nobody to blame but themselves because Qatar missed 2 penalties, but Uzbekistan quite literally missed 3 of the 5 penalties that they took, which is embarrassing, and I'm pretty sure my grandmother could do better. The semifinal is where the final round of insanity took place, though, because if you notice, we end up with a semifinal where it's a good team against a bad team on both sides. It's South Korea against Jordan, and on the other side, it's Iran against Qatar. Now, Iran is not as bad as Jordan, Qatar is not as bad as Jordan. Iran's definitely not as bad as Jordan. Qatar won the Asian Cup 4 years ago. Qatar did. That's just, if you didn't know that, they showed up at the World Cup, they choked. They got really nervous, they played terribly, but Qatar is clearly not a terrible team. And they proved it again because they did manage to beat Iran in what was a back and forth affair that ended in an 82nd minute goal from Almoez Ali, who in the Asian Cup in 2019 scored 9 goals, which is insane. He's a very competent striker. And Akram Afif, who had a really good tournament for Qatar, also scored in this game, and Iran took an early lead, but this game was just wide open, and Qatar was able to win it. The other semifinal, you're thinking, okay, you're going to have a Qatar versus South Korea final. You got the reigning champion against South Korea, who have not won an Asian Cup since 1960, which just sounds impossible. Like, there's no way that's true, but it is. And it continued because South Korea played arguably the worst match I've ever seen a favorite play. They didn't get a single shot on target despite having 70% possession. They gave up 1.8 XG to 0.7 XG, to Jordan. Again, the whole Jordanian team, except for this guy who scored in the 66th minute, plays in the Jordanian league or at an equivalent level. Tamari plays at Montpellier in France, and he just hard carried. Jordan was the better team. They looked better the whole game. The Jurgen Klinsmann experience. I liked him when he was at the U.S. I don't like him anymore. And that brought us to the final that happened just now. Qatar got 3 penalties, and they won 3-1. They scored all 3 penalties. I was rooting for Jordan. Me rooting for a team is apparently the kiss of death. But Jordan did get to the final. They'd never even been to the semifinals before. Maybe they're a dark horse to try and qualify for the World Cup. But Qatar is back-to-back Asian champions after winning this final. Now, all 3 penalties, I know what you're thinking. Qatar's hosting the World Cup. Qatar bribed FIFA to be able to host the World Cup. They're now hosting the Asian Cup. Did they bribe the ref? At least two of the penalties were very clear penalties. I don't think there can be too many complaints other than the fact that, like, if you don't actually look into it and just go, oh, Qatar got 3 penalties, they must have cheated. At least two of them were very clear. I think the second penalty I probably wouldn't have given, but the first and the third penalty were like pretty stone cold penalties. Like, I don't know how you don't call them penalties sort of situation. And Jordan probably should have gotten a red card in like the 89th minute for a dude just running into another player away from the ball, but they didn't get that red card either. So as much as I would love to like hate on Qatar, because I've always kind of disliked them for them bribing FIFA to get the World Cup in the first place, they were just the ones that seem to have done that the most brazenly. I do think Qatar legitimately won this Asian Cup. They've won back-to-back Asian Cups. And all that really does is enforce that they super-duper turbo-choked and just fell apart under the pressure at the actual World Cup. I expect Qatar to qualify for the next World Cup, and then maybe they won't choke again. Maybe they'll be able to be as competent as the other Asian teams that make the World Cup and can apparently beat Spain and Germany. But you missed the Asian Cup. Now you're caught up. That's everything that happened. It was a lot of fun. Watch the extended highlights if you're bored and you have nothing better to do. Have a good one.